All right, so now we are live. So welcome everybody. Tonight or this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are in the world, I am here with Audrey Walsworth, who I think is the world's most traveled woman, and I was just verifying this with her, and I think that's actually true. She has been to all the countries and also almost all of the TCC, the Traveler-Centric Club territories, and there are 329 of them, some of which are incredibly remote and almost impossible to reach unless you organize your own. So we are super excited. I am very excited to have you here with us, Audrey. And I think a lot of people are very excited to hear your story. Our community is all about women who travel solo. And I think you have done quite a bit of that yourself. So it's quite exciting to hear your story and the things you have been doing in the last 50 years, right? Or 50 years close to. So welcome, Audrey. I have this picture from you.
It's nice to be with you.
It's great to have you. And I have this little picture of you here on the cover. Where was this? Because I think this kind of sofa has a bit of a story in itself, right?
Well, I'm sitting in the foyer of my house, and I'm sitting on a howdah that I bought in Thailand a long time ago. And I'm sitting underneath a Benin plaque that I bought in Côte d'Ivoire, and hand carried home, and it's so heavy. So anyway, the picture shows a couple of the things that I've bought in a couple of places that I've been.
And I think your house is full of souvenirs and things that you have collected from all the countries, right?
Oh yes, I'm a shopper, so that has added to it. So every place I've gone, anytime I saw something that was very indicative of that area and was something beautiful, I tried to buy it.
I think that we should do another session where you just take us through your house and we take a tour around the world through all of the things that you have in your house.
Yeah, so I've had people suggest that.
Yes, I think that I've seen some pictures online, some interviews you've given where you can see some of the things you have. That's obviously I haven't been to your house. I think you live in Missouri, right?
Yes, right.
And now you're not traveling like most of us.
No, I'm home. And the strange thing about it is this is the first year that I had not planned any trips. It's almost like I was psychic and could see this coming, although of course I couldn't. But when January came, and that's when a lot of times I had already been planning trips earlier than that. But this year, for some reason or other, I just didn't find the enthusiasm for it. So I didn't plan any trips. So I'm so far not missing out on anything.
Yeah, you saved on a lot of having to cancel and a lot of time fighting with airlines and hotels.
Oh,
I'm still trying to get some of my money back. But so I wanted to, because obviously the claim or the claim that I made on your behalf actually is that you're probably the only woman that has been to all the territories, right? And I was doing some research and I realized that's probably true, right? Obviously these things are a little bit hard to document, but for a lot of people who might be watching this session and for a lot of women in our group, they may not realize how hard this is, right? So I wanted to put this couple of data points on the screen so that people would realize how hard your accomplishment is. There are 193 United Nations recognized countries, plus 2 observer states, which include Palestine and the Vatican. Already, people who have visited the 193, there is not that many, right? I mean, we don't have a real figure, but there's this website called Nomadmania where people enter their details. And on Nomadmania, there's only 118 people who have been to all the countries. But then there are 329 travel-centric club territories. So that's even more than the countries, and some of these territories are really hard to reach places. And on the Nomadmania list, there's only 2 people who have been to all of them. I know that you are not on the Nomadmania list, but there's only 2 on Nomadmania who have been to all the territories, and they're both men. So they're both men, so not really a lot. Already from the countries, women who have visited all the countries, there's only 8 women in the Nomadmania list. So that's already pretty rare. I know there's more that might not be accounted and might not be in Nomadmania, but I think you're probably the only, and I think that's confirmed by the Traveler-Centric Club, that you are the only woman alive who has been to all the territories. And you were just telling me that because they keep adding territories to the list, you made the 328 or 27, right? And now they've added 2 more, and you probably have not been to those 2, right?
No, I have not been to those 2.
Well, you still have time to visit them, and then you will continue to maintain your record, right?
That's right. That's right. Although I have to say that some places, some things that they added were a lot more attractive to me than the two that they just added. So I don't know if I'll do that or not. I may, who knows?
Well, you have already done yourself some of the really, really remote islands, right? That there's really not much to see there. And I think you're going to tell us a little bit about those things, right? So let me jump onto the question. So I watched your interview on Every Passport Stamp. So I know a little bit about your story, but can you give us a little bit of background for those who are listening today about yourself? How did it all start, and what do you do, and how come you travel so much?
Well, I'm 85 years old. I'll be 86 next week. I didn't start traveling till I was 35. And that was because I just had never gotten around to it. When I went to the University of Missouri, and there were not a whole lot of people that traveled a lot, that traveled abroad. And in my family, I was a first generation college goer, so there wasn't anybody in my family that did a lot of traveling. So an opportunity came up when I was married and had 3 children already to go to Lithuania with my mother and aunt. And I thought, if I ever wanted to go there, all 4 of my grandparents came from Lithuania. So I'm probably one of those unique people that is 100% Lithuanian or 100% anything. And so anyway, my husband said, go ahead and look into it. I looked into it. It was $999.95.
Which was a lot of money back then, right? This was 1969.
But it included everything. It included getting the visa. At that time, it also included getting a passport, because I didn't have a passport. So I got a passport, paid the thing, and went with my mother and aunt, because they were still fluent in Lithuanian, because of course they had grandparents that spoke very little English. And my Lithuanian was the kind of Lithuanian you have as a child, school, friends. I knew all those words, but there's no way I could go someplace and discuss the financial situation, the social situation, all those things, because I didn't have the vocabulary for it. So anyway, we made the trip. It was very, very difficult because it was during the Cold War, and we were only allowed to stay 7 days, and the Russians were very hard to deal with. So 10, 11 years in the meantime, I came home, loved the trip. But the one that really ticked my travel bone was the trip to China. And that also came up as kind of a happenstance. They opened up China, and I casually said one night to my husband, I would like to go to China. I think if there's one place I'd like to go there. So he didn't say anything. The next day he came home and he said he saw in the Columbia paper, which is the paper of the school I went to, that there was a trip. They had a trip going to China that was organized with the geography department, if you can imagine. And it was called the Edgar Snow trip to China. And Edgar Snow was the author of the book Red Flag Over China, which Mao considered to be the authentic history of his revolution. So we went to China, and I loved everything about it. It was an absolutely wonderful experience. It was a difficult trip because they were not set up for tourists. So we stayed in some of the most unbelievable places. It was cold.
This was 1980, right?
1980. No cars. There were still carts and horses hauling hay on the main streets of Beijing. People were on bicycles. There were thousands of bicycles every place, but very few cars. You could almost count the cars on one hand. And everybody wore Mao clothes, Mao jackets. There was no color at all. Everything was black, gray, navy. Funny enough, but there was no brown. It seemed like everybody was wearing black, gray, or navy. So that kind of started it. When I kept thinking about going someplace, but I didn't go any place for a couple of years. Then I saw an ad in a magazine for a trip to Tibet. So I thought, well, I think I'd like to do that. And I did. I signed up and went to Tibet. So if you can imagine, my first 3 trips out of the country were to Russia and Lithuania, China, and then Tibet. So once I got to Tibet and saw, and when I was there, incidentally, that was in the old times, before all the tourists came, obviously, and they were still using the old traditional greeting. They would pat the top of their head and stick out their tongue. That's how they said hello. So I realized that I loved the fact that everything was so real, that it wasn't geared for tourists. The shopping, the surroundings, the food, nuts. So I thought, I'm going to concentrate on places that will change the more tourism comes. So the next trip was to Antarctica. Then the next trip was to Papua New Guinea. Then back to Papua New Guinea because I wanted to go to the Tobriand Islands because that's where Margaret Mead did all of her studies. Then Burma because nobody was going to Burma. And at the time I went to Burma, you had to be a group. There had to be 7 of you,
right,
at least. So it was the main airport was just a small hut, a small runway. And when we got there, we had to go to an office and get special permission. And while we were sitting there, a backpacker, a gal came in, and she went in to get the special permit. They wouldn't give it to her because you had to be a group. So right. She came out, then a couple of minutes later, and sat down trying to figure out what she was going to do. Then a guy came in, and he went in, and he tried to get it, and they wouldn't give it to him. So he came out. So they started talking about this, and then they decided, you know what? The 2 of us are a group. So they walked right back in, and they gave them the permits. They had just seen them and knew they were 2 singles traveling separate, but they got the permit they need. So that really just kind of whetted my appetite completely about going places where things were not smooth, where things were real, where things were the way they'd lived for centuries. So that's why.
But you don't travel for work, right? Your job does not require you to travel. This is travel that you do in your spare time.
I'm just a housewife. I got a journalism degree from the University of Missouri. I edited a house organ for Continental Canon in Chicago for a year and a half before I got married. And then once I got married, I was just a housewife. So I hate to say that, just a housewife. I was a housewife. So anyway, so it almost seems like most of what happened to me was coincidence or taking advantage of a possibility.
Right. An opportunity just came up and you were at the right place at the right time and you just took it.
That's exactly right. And there were a lot of trips that were just exactly like that.
And you were traveling in groups, right? You were not traveling on your own.
When I started, I was traveling in groups. And I traveled with groups for quite a while. I took 38 trips with one travel company because I was comfortable with them. And they were going to exotic places. See, it was Travco, and at that time, they were the first ones that went to Vietnam. They were the first ones that went to Burma. So I kind of hitched on to that. And so anytime a new trip to a new place would come up, I got it. I took it. And so the first couple of years, there might be 2 years between trips. Then all of a sudden, there were 2 trips in 1 year. Then another year, there were 3 trips, then 4. Then finally, it ended up that at one time, one year, I did, not 1 year, 2 years, I did 10 trips in a year. And then I kind of leveled off and I did 7 or 8. And then the last couple of years, I've done usually 4 or 5. So that's kind of the story about how it all started.
But so tell me one thing, and I'm going to put the question on the screen. But when did you decide that you wanted to visit all the countries and territories? I guess this has to be a conscious decision, right? Because you cannot just turn up and go and visit. Some of these places require really a very conscious organization to make it, right?
Well, I made a mistake. It was my husband again. He just seemed like he was the instigator. We were sitting around one night, and I was up about 200 countries, and I casually said, if I had known I was going to do this, if I had planned it from the start, if it was a project, then I would have been more efficient, and I could have gone to all the countries on the list. And he said, well, it's not too late, try it. And I said, well, I don't know. And, I don't know, and all that stuff. He said, well, you can try it. If you don't make it, that's one thing, but at least you'll know you've tried it. So that's what started it. And so then from then on, I started concentrating on the list. I had been concentrating on it somewhat, but now I got to the nitty gritty part of it. I got to the toughies.
Right. And it is like some of them, I mean, I think I stand at something like 150, which is a lot for the average person of the TCC.
Oh, yeah.
I've been to 115 countries. That's a lot for the average person, but it's nothing because once you pass the 150, it becomes incredibly hard, right? Because some of these places are really remote.
That's right. They're hard to get to. They're hard to negotiate. You have to spend, some places you have to spend a week because the airline only goes in and out once a week. And so the logistical part of it is what gets difficult. And that's why on some of those trips, although I had stopped traveling with a group, I did go to some of the harder places with a group because it was a lot easier to negotiate. Like some places we had to hire a boat to get to. Like we hired a small diving boat to take us to Pitcairn Island. Well, there were six of us. So the group was, it wasn't like signing up with a travel group. It was a bunch of us getting together and deciding we were going to do something.
Yeah, and you kind of need to, right? Because I'm going to put on the screen one of I read on one of your interviews for Diego Garcia, right? For Diego Garcia, you also, together with some TCC members, I wouldn't call this a group, right? It's just a bunch of really, really hardcore travelers that decide to charter a boat and go to TCC, right? To some of these territories. And one of them be Diego Garcia, which I think is one of your probably the most remote places you have been, right? So tell us about that place, and where is it for the majority of the people who, even myself, who don't know where it is?
Diego Garcia, you have to go to the Maldives to go to Diego Garcia, and then once you get there, you have to hire a boat again. Well, it's because it belongs to Britain, but the United States leases it because they have an air base there that they used as a supply base for the war in Iraq. So it's one of those no places. And but we did get a permit from the British government. One of the people in our group had, some kind of a connection, and I don't remember exactly how he got it, but he got a permit. So we got close to Diego Garcia. We had to leave out of one of the islands in the Maldives, and the boat trip took a couple of days, and we got close. And as we got close, a speedboat came out from the island with 3 soldiers with guns drawn. Wanted to know what in the hell we were doing. We were we were in waters we weren't supposed to be in, and because what they were trying to do is keep yachties away. The yacht people that are sailing around the world. So, and anybody else too. So we showed them our permit, then they got on the boat, and 2 of them rowed in with us to the island, and we spent the day, walked around there. It had been kind of a thriving community, and now was deserted. So that's the story of Diego Garcia.
Would you say this is the most remote place you have been to?
The most remote place I've been to.
Or maybe Pitcairn is probably more remote even, right?
Well, Pitcairn, yeah, but I'd say the South Pole was remote. I'd say the Marquesas are remote.
In French Polynesia.
Yeah, and there are just a lot of pretty remote places when you get right down to it.
But probably Pitcairn is really hard to get to, right? Because I think the boat from time to time, the boat goes maybe once a month or something. I remember when I was in Samoa, I saw the boat that goes to Pitcairn. So first of all, you need to get to Samoa, which is already in itself quite a challenge. And then
That's
you
right.
need to get a boat that goes only once a month, I think, and it takes a really long time to get there.
Well, when we went to Pitcairn, we left out of Mangareva in the Cook Islands, and there were five of us, and there were five very, very seasick people. It was supposed to take 2 days to get to Pitcairn. It took 3.5 days, and we weren't on the boat 20 minutes, and the water got real. It was a small dive boat, which explains it in part. So we all, even the captain on the ship, on the boat, got seasick. So we were not very good company. We were all in our bunks, just as seasick as we could be, and it was so bad and so rough that the bathroom, where the potty was out on the top deck. And so when you needed to use that, you had to tell the captain and the little, we had a mate that was about 15 years old, cutest thing you ever saw. And he would go up and he would hold our hand when we came up the steps, because we had to come down from the hold where we were asleep, where our bunks were. Come up from the hold, then he would hold one arm, and then the captain would hold his arm, and we would walk to the outside, open up the door, use the potty. And the first time I went, and I think I was the first one that used it, they said, you can close the door. I said, close the door. Why in the heck would I don't care about closing the door. Just hold my hand so I don't get washed ashore. So, and then when we got to Pitcairn, the water was still rough, and they set out this huge iron boat that holds probably about 25 people. And they came up to our boat, and we literally dropped off the boat into this kind of a long boat, and they took us in. There's no good place to land, which is why no ships don't land there. There's no good place. But they had built one ramp, so you had to time it. So and incidentally, the guys that were on the boat that caught us when we jumped off and were negotiating the thing were huge. They must have originally, you were on Samoa, so you know how big some of those people are.
Big Polynesian men.
Yes, big men. And they, when we got close to the land where they wanted to land the boat, they would wait until the wave was just right, and it was the wave that washed us up on the shore. And then of course they handed us off, and we stayed for 2 days and 1 night, and it was a real experience because everybody on the land is related. And besides that, was just at the time that they were having the trial over incest on the island. So the island was split in half, with the people that supported the ones that were accused, and the other half who were probably the ones that turned them in. So the whole island was kind of electric. People were against each other. And we stayed with Fletcher Christian, obviously a relative of Christian. And he was evidently on the other side, because they had a big party, and the two of the people that were on our boat, they were invited to that party because the family they were staying with was on the inn, and the one we were staying with was not. So we were not included. And then they had a Seventh-day Adventist church, and we went to church on Sunday. And in the church, they were divided in half, those that were for and those that were against. So it was a more unique experience than it would have been otherwise. And actually, it's a unique experience anyway. So
yeah.
And so and the other thing is, some cruise ships say they're going to stop there, but 90 times out of 100 they can't. And when they do, the boat comes out and meets them, and they exchange souvenirs, and then they go back. So anyway, it was a wonderful experience.
That's the problem with Pitcairn, that a lot of times you cannot land because the sea is too choppy and the boat cannot get anywhere near. And as you say, there's no landing. So the majority of the cruises that say they will stop, they end up not stopping, right?
That's right. However, it is a beautiful island, and they have wild grapefruit and orange trees, and I mean, actually, the people they can sustain themselves pretty well, with the exception of they don't have eggs, and when the supply thing comes, they might buy 100 dozen eggs. You know, they buy ungodly amounts of everything because it's going to be 6 months sometimes before they get another supply ship. So
yeah. How many people live in Pitcairn today?
Well, there were 60. I think about 60 when I was there.
You cannot blame them for incest, right?
No.
Because I mean, there's only 60 people. They don't have any connection with the outside world. As you say, most of the boats don't even land. They stay on the boat, and they might come out to meet them and like buy some things and sell some things. But there's about 8, right? So they don't really have any connection with the outside world.
No, and almost everybody, once they get to a certain age, they leave. It's only the old timers that stay, and then their children, obviously, because there are some young couples that do stay. But the children they have a grade school there, but once they finish with the grade school, then they go someplace else for high school. And so once they go someplace else, there's hardly any possibility, or it's very difficult for them to give that up and go back.
Yes, there isn't really much saying them to come back. Also, it's so hard for them even to come back, right? You might need a few attempts to go back. If you go on the regular boats, you might need a few attempts because you hired your own. But if you go on the public ones, maybe they don't land. And so you might have to try a few times.
That's right. It gets expensive. It gets very expensive.
Very expensive. So tell me some of the funny stories, some things that might have happened. You've been traveling for many years, right? So some of these countries, as you say, China during the time of Mao, Lithuania, communist Lithuania, even Tibet before all of this. I'm sure you've been to many countries. When you were talking about China, your description was like what I've seen in North Korea 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? It's the same kind of like no cars, just bicycles, everybody dressed the same way, right? The same look.
Yeah, that's right. A lot like that. A lot like this similarity was there. But of course, that's understandable when you stop and think about it. There were so many. I have so many stories that it's just really hard to pick anything out. One of the sweet things that happened was in Morocco. I wanted to buy this cute little Moroccan outfit that I saw for my granddaughter, and the merchant wanted 20 dirhams, and I said no, 10. He said 19. I said no, 10. We went back and forth. He kept coming down one. I kept staying at 10. So finally, he got down to 13, and I could tell that he thought I was going to say no, 10. And I said, you know what? All right. He broke out in the biggest smile I'd ever seen. He came over. He shook my hand, kissed me on both cheeks, and said, "Madam, you are wonderful." And it was such and I don't know why I didn't keep going down to 10, and I stopped at 13. But sometimes your instinct tells you, you know what, this is enough. And bargaining is kind of like that. I like it. It's a game. But there's a point where you think about what that means money-wise, and you think, relax a little bit, give in a little bit. This is his country. And it was fun. And of course, he was so happy. And it was just a special moment. And I think there are a lot of times I've seen people bargain and actually get nasty when they keep on both sides, the merchant and the bargainer. And it's supposed to be a game. And if you look at it as a game, then you just kind of make your choices on the moment. How it's
also you have to bargain, right? If you don't bargain with them, they get offended as well, right? That's there's the enjoyment of the bargaining.
Yeah, they're disappointed because that's the fun they have. That's a game. So anyway, but there have been lots. One time in Bangladesh, I was by myself and staying in this really pretty nice hotel, and the waiter the first night said to me that I said, well, I'll have a cup of, they had some kind of soup. I can't remember what it was. I said, I'll have a cup of soup. And so he brought me the cup of soup, and I told him, And I said, now really, oh my gosh, this is so good. Of course, he was fluttering around because they don't get very many single women traveling in Bangladesh. And he was nervous. And I find that to be a lot for the solo travelers, the women. There are places where they are nervous that you're there by yourself. Okay, so I'm by myself and he's fluttering around because he's nervous. So he brings me the soup and I tell him how much I like it, that it's really very good. So 2 seconds later, I get another bowl of soup because I liked it so much, he said. Okay, so I was there, I think 3 days. Lunch and dinner, I got a cup of soup. Before I even sat down, he'd see me coming and he'd have that soup waiting for me. So there are, there are problems with traveling alone, but there are really some special things that happen. But I have discovered that most of the time, the uncomfortable times are in the dining room when you're by yourself in a lot of countries. So my plan is, and I finally figured it out after probably 5-10 years of traveling by myself. The thing to do is I walk in, I sit down, I order a glass of wine, and then I either whip out a book or I whip out my journal so that I'm busy and then they don't bother me. But if you sit there and you're not busy, then they come over, they want to talk, which is all right, except that it's more like they're taking care of you, which you want them to know you don't need to be taken care of. See?
Right.
So anyway, that's just the way.
Yes, it's true. I've seen this happen to me as well. I would take out my phone or a book or a journal, as you say. When I spent 2 months traveling the Pacific by myself, this happened to me every time I sat down for dinner. Either somebody invited me over or somebody would come and talk to me like nonstop. Being invited was also very common, both by foreigners, couples, families, all sorts, and even by the locals, right?
I've had it. But if you whip out that book and journal quick enough, they know that you're, it's like you're sending a signal saying, I'm okay by myself.
Right. So, Maha is asking on the comments if you have any stories from Pakistan.
From Pakistan. Well,
when did you visit Pakistan and where did you go?
Oh my, let's do something right now. Don't ask me what year I did something, because when you stop and think, I've done 160 some trips. And
over 50 years, yes.
I mean, it's just, there's no way, and especially as I said, with some years I did 10 trips, then 9 trips, 8 trips, I mean, there's no way I can. But when I went to Pakistan, we came across the Karakoram Pass from China, and that was an experience. Well, my my story in Pakistan is, I have 2 stories. One of them is would not be very politically correct, but I guess I might as well tell it. We were walking, going into a mosque, I guess. I can't remember what the building was. We had to take our shoes off. Took our shoes off, and one of the gals with us was wearing a skirt, and when she bent over, the back of her legs showed. So there were a group of young men off to the side, and you could tell by the remarks they were making that they were not very nice. They were snide, and that they were suggestive. They were, and I by that time I had gotten not fed up by exactly, but sensitive to how some men treat some women in some countries. So I turned around and I said to them, of course, they didn't understand me because I was speaking in English. And I said, you know what? You guys are bastards. And I hope you know what I said. And they stopped cold and didn't bother us anymore after that. But then by the same token, we stopped at a place in, can't remember what little town it was. It was outside of Islamabad. And I looked at a rug and I wanted to buy it, but I couldn't make up my mind. And we were under pressure to leave right away. And we got to Islamabad and we were in the Pearl Hotel having dinner. And all of a sudden, this merchant shows up with the rug. And well, I wanted to buy it, and they rushed me. They wouldn't let me take the time to buy it. See, so he came all that way. Of course, he was making a sale, and it was to his benefit. But he was so gracious about it, and he even said, you know, I think you, but if you changed your mind, that's okay. That's okay. So that was nice.
So how did he find out where you were staying?
Well, he figured that we were probably, that's where we'd be staying. He guessed, because at that time, and I'm talking about a long time ago, at that time, most foreign tourists, not most, all of them really stayed at the Pearl in Islamabad. Or
so you took a guess and he found it, and you bought the rug, I guess.
Oh yeah, I bought the rug. Sure. I mean, I almost felt like I had to buy the rug, but I wanted it, so I did buy it. It would have been cruel to turn him down after all that. And of course, he knew that too.
And now you have a good memory. And you came into Pakistan from China, so you drove all the way from the north.
That's right. And we had a hard time getting in. We had to stay, we were a tax organ in China, and had to stay overnight while the Pakistanis decided whether they were going to let us in, because we were coming from China. And of course, they didn't have good relations at the time. And the interesting thing was, there was a Danish bike rider who was in the hotel sitting in the lobby when we checked in. And he had a bicycle with him, but it had no wheels. And he had tried to cross the border from China to Pakistan without a visa. He was sneaking across the border, and the Chinese caught him. So they took him over to the hotel. They took the wheels off his bicycle and took his money and his passport. So he was sitting in that lobby trying to figure out what he was going to do. And he couldn't even buy dinner. So the group of us, we bought his dinner for him. And when we left, he was still sitting there. We had to stay all night. When we left, he was still sitting there. And I don't know, for all I know, he could probably still be sitting there. But he couldn't go anyplace. He didn't have any wheels on his bicycle, and he didn't have any money, and he didn't have his passport. So he was stuck. I don't know how long he got stuck, but those are crazy things you remember.
Yes, I have good memories of Pakistan. I liked it very much. I was there not so long ago, just after they started.
I liked it too. We were there when they had the earthquake, and I don't know how long ago that was. Everything shook. The bus shook. It was, people were screaming, but there wasn't a lot of damage. So.
And the landscapes in the north must be quite beautiful. I've only been to Lahore, so I haven't seen the landscapes, but.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
So tell me about some like cultural faux pas or mishaps that you must have felt, like sometimes that you're in a place and you don't quite understand the culture, and you do something that you think for you might be normal, but in the place it's not really, like what you were saying in Tibet, right? I'm sure that when they stuck their tongue out the first time, you thought, what's going on?
Oh, yeah. To be perfectly honest with you, I probably did do some faux pas, but in the countries that I did, and the people must have been so gracious, they never made an issue out of them. I generally try to, I don't read a lot. I read generally a little before I go, especially when it's a big cultural change, so that I can find out what are things that absolutely shouldn't be done. So I just don't do those. So I can't say that I've had a lot of cultural things. There have been times when I've worried about the cultural differences. I mean, in some places, I don't know how I want to put this. Like India, the driving in India is enough to scare the heck out of you, and yet you don't feel like you can say anything about it. What are you going to do if you get in the car? You've just taken your life in your hands, but that's okay. That's the way it is. So anyway, I can't say that I can think of a real cultural faux pas that I did, or if I did something, people were gracious enough not to make an issue of it.
I guess it's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell me about places that exceeded your expectations, that you went there and you didn't expect much, and then it completely blew your mind.
Well, I thought I thought Croatia and Slovenia were much more beautiful than I thought they would be. I loved the Marquesas. I would say that the Marquesas were one of the most beautiful. Have you been there?
No, I've only been to Bora Bora and Tahiti. Well, only.
Okay.
Already very beautiful
Well,
places, but the Marquesas are so hard to reach, right? Mostly you need to be on a cruise, I guess.
well, I flew in. We flew in. My friend and I flew in, and we stayed at probably the only hotel at that time. It was up on top of a bluff, but the airport's a long way away from where the town is, where the people live, because it's the only flat place where they could put an airport.
Right.
And there aren't very many planes that come in. But it's a beautiful country, beautiful beaches, and what makes it beautiful is there are not a lot of people, and there are not any tourists to speak of at all. And so we stayed at this hotel was rather like a motel. You look like a motel, like our motels. And an American woman was running it. She's married to a Frenchman, and he was there too, but she was running it, and she was very gracious. And we were the only ones in the motel. And we had a waiter that was a male. His name was Louis, but he was rather dressed like a woman. I mean, he had a sarong on, and he had flowers in his hair, and he talked like a woman. And the gal that owned it asked us if we had, did we notice him? And I said, well, it's a little bit hard not to notice him. And she said that in the Marquesas, and I think in some other South
In Samoa as well, it's the same.
Yeah, if say 3 or 4 boys are born, and then another boy is born, and there are no girls, the youngest one is raised as a girl. So it's a cultural thing. So that child will take care of the older people when they're at a point where they can't take care of. Perfectly normal in their culture. And anyway, he was a real charmer, and every day a different flower, and he was fun. So but the Marquesas are incredibly beautiful. But there are, let me tell you, a lot of beautiful places in this world. A lot.
Yes, a lot of them. Just sometimes there are places that disappoint you. You have high expectations and then you go there and you're disappointed, or you just see them hyped up a lot online on social media and so on. And then you get there and maybe because your expectations were so high, then when you see it, you're a bit disappointed. Some of the really touristy places sometimes can be very crowded. I'm from Barcelona, so even Barcelona in the peak of the season, if you go in August, you probably would be disappointed. But then there are places that you go there and you're surprised, right? I think to me, Albania positively surprised me a lot. Montenegro as well surprised me a lot. Much more beautiful than I thought. I think for French Polynesia, I already had high expectations. So when I went there, I was expecting it to be as beautiful as it is, right? So Bora Bora, you see honeymoon, right? 90% of the people going to Bora Bora are on their honeymoon. So it's the ultimate dream place,
So
right?
It's a happy place, and that's
it's a happy place. And I was there on my own. So that was a real shock for the people in the hotel.
I'll bet.
They were thinking the whole time. Yeah, I think they thought that I probably broke up at my engagement or my wedding before the day, and I decided to go anyway.
Yeah, I'll bet that's exactly what they thought. Yeah,
because I was the only one. It was quite interesting like that. Tell me about, well, I think we talked a little bit about this already, but is there any other really tough place that you have been to? Sometimes places that a lot of people will not be familiar with, or places that when you tell people, they look at you and they're like, I have no idea where this is. I cannot even tell you what continent it is on.
Well, I would say that going to North Korea was difficult, mostly because of the logistics of it. I'd say going to Margarita Island, because you had to go to Venezuela, and it was not too long ago that I did that, so it was in the height of all the troubles, and that was a difficult trip because nothing worked. Absolutely nothing worked. The airport was chaotic. That was difficult. Of course, Africa is probably the most difficult place to travel in, just because most of the countries don't really have a system. Or if they had a system, it's broken down to the point where it doesn't function. And so it's very difficult to travel in Africa. So when you go to Africa, you have to say to yourself, just relax. It'll work out in the end. It always does. But be prepared for just about anything. So, I mean, there have been places where it's been countless passport checks, visa checks, baggage checks over and over again, where they'll have 50, 60 people wanting to get out of plane, one person doing everything, you know. So
and you see the passports moving from pile to pile, right?
That's right.
And it's like,
right.
and it's kind of like it's working in LIFO, like.
That's right. And then you see the embarkation or slip that you filled out. They pick it up and throw it right in the trash can. You know, so you have to just kind of relax and go with the flow. But you have to be, especially when you're checking your bags or when you're leaving a plane and you've got your bags. You have to be strong. You have to forge ahead. I've done pushing and shoving in Africa that I've never ever done anyplace else. But that's what's happening. That's what everybody's doing. I get it's part of the culture, I guess. You know, they're just there's not a lot of organization. But anyway, I've had people in the crowd seeing a hard time that I was having pick up my suitcase, hold it up the top of their head, and start shoving people away to let me through. You know, so it always works out. And
it always works out. There's always a friendly person trying to help you.
Absolutely. And so you have to look at it as an experience. But it is difficult. If you're the kind of person that can't handle stressful situations, you might as well not go to Africa. Unless you're only going to you're only going to Johannesburg. Not Johannesburg, Cape Town. You know, then that's easy.
Yes, I used to go to Africa for work. So I would go in my suit with my laptop and with a schedule and a timetable, you know, meetings at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it was stressful because you see your passport moving from pile to pile and you don't know if it's going to take 5 minutes or 3 hours. Meanwhile, it's really hot. I remember once being in the airport in Dar es Salaam, we landed. You know, you have to go through the visa on arrival. Every week we go through the visa on arrival. The passport keeps moving and we do it every week, right? So we know exactly what's happening. Then suddenly there's a locust, like a huge amount of locusts flying around in the airport inside the arrivals hall, like hundreds of thousands of them. And, you know, it's really hot and people are trying to get rid of them and they're jumping in your face and you're wearing a suit. And the whole thing is just chaotic and you're like, I cannot believe this. And you have to go to your meeting with, you know, with the board of directors of your client and you're like, this is not happening. So if you are in that situation, cannot.
And you say to yourself, I can't handle it. But you always end up handling it.
Yeah. And, you know, and the client knows that this is how it is anyway, right? So if you're late, they're kind of like, you know, 10 minutes is not late. It's just, it's on time, right? It's if you're 10 minutes late, you're on time. So these things just work out like that, right? But it's these anecdotes that you remember. I remember this now and it's been 12 years, right? So I still remember it vividly. So these are the things you remember. What is the toughest visa that you managed to get? Because some of the visas have become easier with time, but maybe when you were trying to process them, like for example, Pakistan was relatively easy for me. I just had to go to the embassy a few times, but they gave it. Now you can get visa online. But for a lot of the countries, maybe when you went, it was quite a hassle to get the visa.
Well, China was the first time. I looked through my journal and I discovered that I've been to China 8 times. So I've seen all the I've seen drastic changes. But the first couple of times, even the first four times or 5 times, getting a visa from China was difficult because it took over a month. See, I just never got around to it. Now the visa for North Korea was difficult too, because when I went, listen to this, if this isn't crazy, this just shows you how we country counters operate. We flew to Beijing to go to North Korea, not knowing for sure if we would get a visa. So we flew to China, took us 2 days and 2 trips to the North Korean embassy, which was a small office up over a bakery, to get the visa, and then finally got the visa. But we did get it. You know, You just sometimes you have a gut feeling that this is going to work out. Otherwise, why would you take the chance of flying clear from the States to Beijing, not knowing that you get that visa or not? But now the visa, when I first went to Angola, I didn't have any trouble getting a visa. But the second, when I wanted to go to Cabinda, which is part of Angola, although it's not physically part, it belongs to them. It's separated land-wise. We tried and tried and tried to get a visa and couldn't get it. So, and now I don't know right now what the status is with Angola, whether or not you can get.
Yeah, I remember the same. When I was working in Africa, I wanted to go to Angola, but that was the time when it was practically impossible to get a visa. They had quotas, even for business. We were trying to set up business meetings, and it was not possible to get the meeting because we couldn't get a visa, and then we couldn't get a hotel because they were just restricting it a lot, even though it was incredibly expensive. Very, very expensive, hotels costing a few $100s for something that's not barely a 3-star. It was the time when it was like not possible to go. So maybe it was the same time that you were trying to go a second time. I think now it's a bit easier. It's a bit better now.
Oh, is it? Well, that's good to hear, because that makes it easier for everybody, the business people and also the travelers that would love to see it, because Angola is a very nice country. They have a beautiful beach, but of course the beach is full of squatters, right there in Luanda. But a beautiful beach, and maybe they've made the squatters move. I don't know, but I would hope so, because they do have some things going for them. There are a lot of countries in Africa that are difficult because there's no infrastructure. The roads are bad, but I can't remember what country it was, which country in Africa it was, where in some small village a woman said to me, we had to stop for some reason or other, and she came up to the car and she said, I was talking to her, and she said, we're poor, but we're happy. Just kind of like she wanted us to know that looking around, we could see that people were poor, but they were happy. And that's true. That's true. There are a lot of poor people, but there are a lot of happy people too. So that's encouraging.
Bindu is asking if you travel a lot on your own, right? As well, not just always in tours. You also go on your own, like you were saying in Bangladesh. Any place that you have not felt completely safe as a woman?
I can't say that I felt completely safe in Yemen.
Did you go before the recent travels? I went there in 2006 when it was completely fine.
Yeah, I went. I don't know. It's probably been 10 years since I've been to Yemen. But the reason I didn't feel safe was not a physical, I don't know how to explain this. Well, I guess I didn't feel safe because I had so much trouble. The car that was supposed to pick me up at the airport didn't show up, and we were the last plane in. So there I was at the airport. They're shutting out the lights, and I'm standing outside, and nothing is coming. Finally, somebody at the hotel remembered, and they sent someone for me. Got to the hotel, and they told me I didn't have a room, even though I had, at that time, you had to have a telex confirming your hotel. I had 4 or 5 telexes confirming it, and he kept saying, no room, you don't have a room. Another instance of not knowing how to handle a single woman traveler. In some countries, that exists. So I guess that's what it was. I mean, I'm sure he could tell by looking at me, I wasn't a terrorist. I wasn't going to do anything. So finally, by this time I'm panicking because it's about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I don't have a room, and I'm in Yemen. I don't know where to go. So I finally said to him, well, do you have a room? And without thinking, he said, yes. I said, I'll take it. And he didn't know what to do. See, he committed himself, and I'd committed myself. So he gave me the room. And then the next morning, the local travel agent that was supposed to send someone to take me on a tour, they didn't show up. So I had to hire a cab and go over. So it was little things like that made me feel like they really didn't want me there. They really didn't. I was like a hot potato. They were trying to figure out how they were going to handle all of this.
Right.
And then I was confronted in the marketplace by a friend of the guide I had, who started ranting and railing about Americans and our presidents and everything. And people were starting to gather, and I was the only non-Yemeni in the crowd. And I finally said, we don't need to have this conversation. I'm a guest in your country, and I just want to see your people. And then that stopped it.
It was the time when it was like not possible.
Right. In Yemen, I had a very positive experience, actually. I didn't go there alone. I went there with my partner at the time. And we were staying at the Sheraton, and our main concern was whether they were going to ask us for a marriage certificate. So we decided to stay at an international chain to make sure that, because, technically you cannot sleep with the same room with somebody you're not married to. So we were worried that they might ask us for a marriage certificate, and we were not married. So we decided to stay at an international chain to make this easier, and they didn't ask, so that was fine. But we were wandering in the streets, and I was dressed quite conservative. I was wearing not a headscarf, but like a big bandana covering my head, most of it. And we were walking in the street with my partner, and some women suddenly come out into the street. They were fully covered with the abaya and all, and they started talking to us, and they said that, we're having a fashion show inside. This is one of my most beautiful travel stories that I've had in all the years of travel myself. And they invited us over, and this was a female wedding fashion show. So there were only women and my partner, who was a British. So I guess that because he was a British man, they thought you can come over, no problem. So they invited us both in, and we sat in the audience. And then they had all these women from all the tribes in Yemen, and there are many of them, in their traditional wedding dresses, really beautiful. Really, really beautiful, with these headpieces and so on, parade. And if that wasn't enough, they had somebody, the only person in the audience that could speak English, do the entire show in English just for us. So we were sitting in the audience with all these women, and they had somebody on stage doing everything in English, all the definitions of the tribes and what they were doing and the traditions and the dresses and everything in English, only for us. And then they had a raffle, and they gave us tickets with numbers, and of course the tickets were in English, were in Arabic as well. So by that time I could pick up quite a lot of Arabic numbers, so I could more or less tell if we were beginning or not. But we were like the sensation of the day, right? Obviously, all these women giggling and talking to us. They could barely speak English, only this one that spoke English that translated all for us. And I have all these selfies with all these women that just wanted to take selfies with me, but I couldn't see who was talking with me because they were all fully covered. So I could just hear voices, and I didn't know who was talking to me. So it was just this beautiful thing that maybe 2 or 3 hours there, and my partner, who was a white man, but for them, I guess it was a novelty, and they thought it's fine, he can come over, and he was the only man in the whole thing, right? So it was quite I have those pictures, those selfies with those women, and some of the fashion show that are quite, one of the nicest memories that I have from all my time as well. So you see, this just goes to show, right? The same place. Absolutely. Sometimes.
Well, by the same token, that made me think of what happened to me also in Yemen. I was in one small town just looking around with my guide, and all of a sudden someone came up to the guide and me and said that they were having a dance, and did I want to come see it? Well, I said, of course, I'd love to see it. Well, it was all men, and they were dancing with knives, with the knives that the Yemenis wear in their, their belts. Yeah. And so they were flashing these knives around and dancing and hopping up and down and singing and carrying on. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh. And, but anyway, they were showing off, and they were doing some things I know just because I was there watching them. And that was fun too. And when it was all over with, they were laughing, and a wonderful experience. And I'd forgotten about it too. You talked about the wedding things. There's so many little things like that happen that make a trip, even if it's a tough trip, it makes the trip okay. Makes the trip good, wonderful.
Yes. Somebody is asking as well if you have travel insurance when you travel.
Well, sometimes yes, and sometimes no. If it's a real expensive trip, I try to, but I've not had good experience with travel insurance. So most of the time I just take it.
But you do have health insurance when you travel.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So the travel insurance would be more for in case of cancellations or delays, or if your baggage gets stolen.
That's right. Because some places, they're not really eager to give you travel insurance, because they know that there are going to be all kinds of hiccups.
Yes. A lot of these places.
I went to Socotra last year and had an absolutely horrible time and turned in some, and I had to, in order to take the trip, they required travel insurance. And I had trip delay, baggage delay. I didn't get my bag for over a week. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong, and they disavowed everything. So, what's the point?
What was the last place that you visited on the TCC list?
Probably Socotra.
Right.
Yeah, because I did that last year. And then I did that last year in April. And then I went to Bhutan. I took my daughter and and then I went to Vanuatu, and then I went to Paris to visit my friend, and she and I went to the Italian part of Switzerland. So there were just 4 trips last year.
Wow, just 4 trips, quite varied as well between Socotra and Vanuatu and Paris.
Oh yeah, but Socotra was wonderful. It's a rocky island with very little green, some green here and there, but it's so beautiful, and it's got so much more to offer than the Dragon Blood trees that it's a shame it's not easily visited. But I'm glad it's not easily visited, because it would be crawling with tourists, because the beaches are spectacular. They're so beautiful. So beautiful.
Yes, I kind of regret not having gone there when I lived in Dubai. For those who don't know, Socotra is an island in Yemen, right, on the Gulf of Aden, right?
Yes.
Kind of in between the Middle East and Africa, kind of like between the Arabian Peninsula and Africa.
The Arabian Sea meets the Indian Ocean. It has so much going for it. It's just absolutely beautiful. People are very nice. It's difficult. It's if there are not any hotels to speak of, just one, but it's more than adequate. A lot of people that go there camp.
Yeah.
So it's still at that stage of development. And frankly, it would not help them to have a lot of tourists. It would not help them. It would be
the infrastructure is not yet there, right? So
no, I mean,
think
there's just
not
really one road that's even passable. The rest of them are just look like some bulldozer came through and decided this was a good place to put a road. So.
Somebody else is asking as well if you usually take private local guides instead of group tours.
Well, even with the group tours, we always have a local guide. I think that it's to your benefit to have a local guide, because that's someone that not only knows the territory, but knows his way around, knows how to handle situations, knows areas where it might not be smart to go. Anyway, I've always had a local guide, even with the group trips.
Right. And tell us, I've already kept you for an hour, so I don't want to keep you any longer. But, I know that we could chat for hours on end, and I'm sure that a lot of people could as well. But do you have any tips for, obviously, the community is everybody's solo female travelers, so everybody is women from all over the world. Do you have any safety tips, things that you do after so many years there and your experience to keep safe, things that you do everywhere?
Well, I don't know that I have any real safety trips. I think attitude is probably the most important thing. If you act like you're sure of yourself, but I found really and truly the most important thing is to smile. When you meet somebody, smile at them. When you see somebody, smile at them. And I don't mean facetiously. I mean just genuinely show them that you're glad they're there. And I have to say the biggest thing, I've been in some really dicey situations, but I let my instinct tell me what to do, and I let my instinct tell me whether to get in that situation in the first place. So
Crystal is also asking if you've been to Mount Sinai. I think Mount Sinai is one of the TCC territories, right?
What is it?
Mount Sinai, in between Israel and...
Yes. Yeah, I have. I was there, I think, just 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I was surprised there because it's a little bit like Las Vegas, the main strip, and I had not expected that. See, I really not. And then it was too dangerous. They wouldn't let us go much out of the city. So I would have loved to go to St. Catherine's Monastery And but that didn't work out. They wouldn't. There were no trips there. They wouldn't allow it. So, but
Right.
I thought one thing I thought was interesting. They have a big church, and the church on Sunday at 9 o'clock, it's a Catholic church. At 10 o'clock, the Baptists have their church. At 11 o'clock, the Christians. At 12 o'clock, I mean, that's the only ecumenical church I've ever seen in my whole life. So I thought that I enjoyed the trip, but it was not anywhere close to what I expected it would be.
Right. Interesting. I thought that Mount Sinai would be more like Gibraltar than Las Vegas.
That's right. I was surprised. I'm not surprised. I was shocked.
So one last question: what is your next trip going to be like when we are all allowed to travel? What is the next thing the next place you'd like to go?
Do you know something? For the very first time, I can't think of any place I want to go. And I don't know if it's because I just am settled into the fact that traveling isn't easy at my age. I don't want to go someplace and find myself in a situation that I can't handle physically, and or not be able to see the best thing at that place just because I can't walk, up to the top of the mountain like I used to always do. And so I don't know. Something will come up. I've told everybody that I'm going to wait. And quite a few times through the years, trips have dropped in my lap. Someone's called me and said, you know what, I'm thinking about going to so-and-so, want to go. So I'm going to kind of see if that happens. So right now I have no place. And that's a first for me, as you can tell. Because, 160 some trips. I always had 2 or 3 lined up. Well, even most of the time more than that.
Interesting.
So,
And also, obviously, I know that you don't usually travel with your husband, right? He doesn't actually like to travel.
No, he's not a good traveler. It would spoil the trip for me. He'd have a miserable time. So we decided that best not to even try. Now, we did travel together. We've been to England and Scotland and Ireland and to the islands, Bermuda and stuff. But to go someplace where he can't speak the language because he likes to visit with people, where he doesn't understand the food, he wouldn't leave the hotel, and he'd expect me to stay with him, and I'm not going to do that when I'm someplace interesting. So it just doesn't work. So it's a mutual thing. And then I've been very blessed because he's never asked me what a trip cost. So that was good.
I guess he understood that this is what makes you happy, right? So better you spend it on that than.
Yeah, this is my hobby. This is my passion, and he has his, and I have mine. Travel.
Yes, I think I am the same situation with my partner. At the beginning, he tried to travel with me, but then after a year, he one day said to me, "You know what? I've tried, but I actually don't like to travel." So you go and do it. You go wherever you like, with whoever you like. You go and do it. It clearly makes you happy. You really love it. But I'll go with you to Spain and Italy, and and maybe Europe in general. But that's about it. As long as there's good weather, good food, I'll go with you. But don't ask me to go to anywhere in Africa or even most places in Asia. Not to Timbuktu. Definitely not to Timbuktu. And now that you say Timbuktu, I'm going to finish with a couple of pictures that I have from you. And I think one of them is in Timbuktu, or at least it's in Mali. Let me put them on screen so that you can see them as well.
No, the one on the left is in Timbuktu. The one in the middle is in Ethiopia at the Mercy tribe. And then the other one is in Timbuktu. Yeah.
Timbuktu has always been in my wish list. It's always been a place that conjures images of magic and adventure and some really far away place. So it's always been on my dream list, but it's really hard to get there, right? As you know.
Yes,
and occasionally it becomes very unstable and very dangerous to go to.
That's right. The first time I went, it was a real joy. The second time I went, it was not so much because it was already very dangerous and changed considerably.
Yeah, and they have this music festival at the beginning of the year that they do every couple of years that I've been wanting to go, but last time they canceled it because of safety concerns, and I think that the next one is next year.
Yeah, it's not a very safe place to go.
So, well, do you have any last words to tell to the women who want to travel solo or who are looking to travel solo or who want to do like you? Anything else you would like to tell them?
I would just say, if you want to go someplace and you have to go by yourself, go, because right now things are changing so quickly and problems come up, and just, if you can, do it and enjoy it. You will. I'm sure you will.
Fantastic. After our call, I'm going to send you a video, a small documentary that we did when I interviewed 27 women, and I asked them all as well, like last words, what do you say to women? And it doesn't matter where they were from or what age they were or what background, everybody had exactly the same words as you. If you want to go, if you really want to do it, just do it, just do it. That's because right. You will enjoy it.
That's exactly right.
Well, thank you so much, Audrey. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this and putting up with the technological difficulties that we had at the beginning. I'm sure that everybody enjoyed this. I know that we could talk for hours. So thank you really so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure, believe me. Thank you for asking me. Okay, goodbye.
See you, Audrey. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have you checked out our website? It's the go-to resource for everything solo female travel. If you identify as a woman, join our safe and private community on Facebook, Solo Female Travelers. We publish new YouTube episodes every week, so don't forget to subscribe so you're the first to know. Solo travel, but never alone.
But there are, let me tell you, a lot of beautiful places in this world. A lot. Madam, you are wonderful. Or I whip out my journal, and then they don't bother me. So it always works out.